Standard 2 Objective 3 deals with worksheets. The two examples we're going to look at will be the Google Sheets and Microsoft's Excel. When you first look at these, they're not very exciting. It's just a bunch of grids. They're arranged in columns, which go up and down. They're arranged in rows, and where each of those columns and rows meet is a cell. Same thing when we go look at our Google document right here, our Google Sheet. But let's look at some offerings they have here, some things we can do with this. We can create a to-do list, a monthly budget, a calendar. There's a lot of different things that we can do with a spreadsheet. It's quite simply because it's a very simple thing that can be modified and it can fit whatever needs you have. So let's look at maybe a grade book. In this particular case, I have a grade book that it's opening for me, and I can see a distribution based on this class. This is only 3 students, but you can see how many have A's, B's, C's. We're looking at the data here of the average scores on different assignments, and here's our grading system. One of the things about a spreadsheet is that you can have multiple pages, and these pages can link together. So this first one is the overview of the class. The second one is the actual grades. This is where you can enter the students' names, and you can start putting in what they're getting on each of their assignments. Each of these columns could have a new assignment in it, and it could have a different value assigned to it. So out of 50, there's 49 here. And it does the calculations for us and gives us the percentages. Individual reports can be done on each student. So here's student 1. It shows you how they're doing compared to the class average. Back on Excel, if we open up a new Excel document, we could do a similar thing. Here's a family budget. This family budget can be customized. We put the family name in here, we put the month, December, maybe the year is 2015. We can do some projections. We have a chart here. This is a simple bar chart showing cash flow, monthly income, and expenses. We have some options here. We have projected income, total expenses, and the total cash that we think we're going to have for that particular month. We can add up all of our expenses by category, kind of get a rough idea of what we're spending. So the sheet can be very easily customized. I can add a new sheet just by clicking at the bottom. Here we have a whole brand new sheet. Now these spreadsheets, like I said, are organized in columns and in rows. Each of them have a particular cell. You can use them to add up numbers with. So I'm just going to put a few numbers in here. Each cell in a couple of different ways could be used to sum this up. I could put the sign equals, and then I could click on the cell. So if you look up in the formula bar, this cell that I'm in is equal to the cell I've clicked on, plus the next cell I click on, plus the third cell I click on. When I hit enter, it gives me my answer is 6. Spreadsheets are nice because if you have to change your data, it automatically updates what you're seeing here. Let's make this a little bit bigger. So if I'm having to change the data in a particular cell, it will continue to update for me. I've gone out and found a large data set. This is population levels throughout the world. It's a population set from 2010, but it shows the population of these countries, and we'll just assume that all this data is accurate. We know there are probably some discrepancies in it, but that's okay. For our purposes, this is just some data we're going to work with. We started in 1950, the United States, with 152 million people. You can see all the data is in thousands. So in 1950, we had 152 million people. We scroll over here. Let's go to 2015. And this is one of the disadvantages of spreadsheets. We're not quite sure what row this was. I know we were on row 35. But let's go back to the beginning of the chart. I'm going to grab this column. And in this column, I'm going to go up to my View tab. And I'm going to split my screen. What this does is it creates a little line right here, so that when I scroll over to the right, it leaves that first column alone. So I could maybe start with the year. Let's start with 1967 just for fun. there's 198 million people here living in the country. And let's skip ahead to 2015. The nice thing is I can still see the United States here in this first column. So let's bring this over to 2015. Population of the United States, 2015 is roughly 325 million people. Now that's kind of the long way to go about doing it. The power of the spreadsheet comes in our ability to create charts and graphs. So let's create a chart right now. We're going to grab the population of the United States in 1987. We're going to come across to about 2015. And we can see that we went from 242 million to about 325 million in that time period. It's kind of hard to see and wrap our heads around. So we're going to come up to Insert, and we're going to put in some charts. So we can insert a line chart, and when I do this, you see the very first thing I see is just this plain line chart. It shows where we were. It shows where we're at. It's pretty simple to format this. Population growth, US 1987 through 2015. Pretty simple to add that there. It allows us to see this is where we were, this is where we're at. And we can do some other things with formatting. We can go into the fonts. We can change how they look. We can put different colors on them, different outlines. That's not what we're going to get into quite yet, but it just shows you that the chart is pretty powerful for showing you the population of, the growth anyway, of the United States. The last chart we made, that line chart, was a good indicator of how much we've grown. But what if we want to do a comparison? Let's grab a list of countries here. So I'm going to go all the way from Australia down to the United States. I'm going to hold down my Control key. I'm going to move over here to the same population for 2015 and drag so that I have a corresponding set of data. And now when I let go, I have the country names and I have the actual data I'm going to be using. Let's insert a chart. This time let's do a pie chart so we can do some comparison. You can see this is a pretty big chart. In fact, it's so big it doesn't even show everything. We need to drag this down and make it a little bit bigger. It's kind of hard to tell based on the information we have here, but if we mouse over it, you can see that this is the United States. It represents about 26% of the world population from this sample. If I wanted to, I can click here. I could change the fill color. Let's make the fill color black just to make sure that that's what we're looking at. Yes, it is. So the United States here, and this representation is about 26% of the world's population. Don't let that throw you off, though, because that's just a select sample. Let's look at another pie chart comparing the United States population to the world population. So let's create that chart. I'm going to click on the United States over here on the left-hand side so that we have our label. Hold my Control key down and go to 2015. Let's click on our population. Keeping the Control key down so I can multi-select, I'm going to click on the world. I'm going to grab the world's population right here. Now I have the United States with our data and the world with the rest of the population. Let's go to our charts. Let's grab a pie chart. And you can see how the United States compares to the rest of the world in population. So we can come to our chart title, type US versus world population. Okay, so we have some data here. You can see it's a way we can look at it. We can change the chart type that we're looking at here. We can make it a proportion. We can make it a 3D. Maybe. We can make this a bar chart to compare the amount of the world population versus the United States. That's kind of a pretty good representation there. Column chart, again, the US versus the world. So you can see there's a couple different options we have here for looking at our data. Another thing we can do with our cells is we can modify their shape and their size. We can grab the edge of a column and we can make it wider. You can see I've created more room here. I'm going to Control Z to undo that. If I have columns that I don't want, let's say I only want to look at the population every 10 years. I can highlight the years in between. I can right click and I can just delete those columns. So there I've got 1950, I've got 1960. I'm going to have 1970. So I can go through and I can delete all this extra data that I would have had before and just get rid of it. And I'm only going to be looking at every 10 years worth of data. And this is probably the last point I have good data for, because after 2010 we're obviously for 2020 just doing a projection of what we think it'll be. 2030, delete some more, come back to 2040, and then delete again. So now what I have is I have a table that shows me the populations actual and projected for some different countries. So let's look at a country like Germany. Germany is a country that is actually starting to lose some population right now. So I'm going to highlight this data. We don't see it very quickly when we first look at it unless we look at the numbers and think about what they look like. So I'm going to go to Insert. I'm going to grab a chart. I'll just grab a line chart, and you can see what's happening to Germany's population. They don't have as many children now, and so their birth rate has been declining. Compare that with another country. Let's compare that with China. Where are they at? There's China there. So we grab China here. Let's insert another chart. This chart will be another 2D chart. And you can see with China, if I don't mess it up if I grab it correctly, let's compare China versus Germany. They both have the same thing going on. China's had some really huge growth, but they've also started to taper off. Let's throw one more chart in here. Let's throw the United States in so you can see where they're at. Insert. We're going to grab another chart, make it this line chart. Growth in the United States continues to climb. That's what's being projected based upon our current birth rates. Let's grab one more. Let's grab our neighbor to the south of us. Where'd they go? There's Mexico. Okay. Mexico, we'll grab them, insert. We're going to grab another chart. We're looking at their population. You can see they are also starting to decline. Now, the United States is the only one of the four that is projected to not taper off. Now, that might be because of birth rates. That might be because of inward migration. Who knows? But that's what the projections are right now. And you can see rather quickly from this series of data, we can get a pretty good picture of what's going on with world population. And it's really easy to understand precisely because it is a picture. It's also relatively easy in a spreadsheet to add in more columns and rows. Simply we just right click and it's going to ask us what would you like to do. We would like to insert, in this particular case I'm going to insert a row. So if I wanted to have the data from 1985 thrown in here, I could go put that data back in there. I just did the insert. The other option would be if I just Control plus, that's going to also add another column for me. Same thing with rows. Say I forgot a country, I can use the Control plus and add a row there. Or I can come to Greece, I can right click, and I can insert a row. And you can see that rather quickly I can just add room for more data. By the same token, I just right click and I take it right back out. Let's look at some more data. This is an assignment that I give my kids at school. We're going to calculate some information about some bowlers. Now, bowling, you can get anywhere from 0 to 300 points. So obviously the higher the better in this instance for a bowling team member. You have to decide who you want to have on your team. Looking at this string of numbers, you can't get anything out of it. So let's look at a couple of functions we can use. We're going to look at the sum, the average, the maximum, or the high score, the minimum, and the range. So there are a couple of ways we could do this. We could come up here to our auto sum button, and most of what we're doing is going to be up here. If I pull this down, it gives me sum, average, count, max, min. There's a lot of other things it does that we're not going to get into, but the sum is quite simply adding up the values. So it says that this cell is going to be equal to the sum of cells C13 through C30. So we're in column C, and we're in rows 13 through 30. It's going to add up all these numbers for us. So in these games, Jared's score came out to 2466. We can calculate the average of his scores, again, by going up to the auto sum. we're going to put the average in here. Now Excel is going to try to help us out, try to guess where it wants things. We do not want to include the sum in here. We only want just the range of his actual scores. So we're going to drag around here. Again, it's going to be equal to the average of C13 through C30. My high score is the maximum. So let's come again up to our auto sum button. That's not what I want. We're going to come up, pull down the menu. We want to have the maximum. The maximum is the highest number. Again, it's trying to be helpful, but we can see obviously that the highest number here is going to be the sum. So let's just drag again until we get all of Jared's scores. Hit enter. So you can see now we're getting a feel for what kind of a bowler he is. His average is 137. His high is 203. What about his low? What's he like when he's the worst off? So let's come down to our sum button here, grab him in, and again we only want the range of the actual scores that he's played. So Jared gets a score anywhere from 67 to 203, and his average score is 137. Let's look at the range. We don't have a function here for the range, so what we're going to do is we're going to manually insert a formula. We're going to make this cell equal by pressing the equal key to the highest score. So I click on that cell, minus whatever our lowest score cell is. You can see the formula is it's going to take the high number here of C33 and subtract whatever values in C34. We hit this and we can see that Jared has a range of 136. I've added a couple of numbers here and some words on the side to show you some of the power of Excel. If we have a series of numbers, in this case 1 through 4, we have a fill handle down here. This is called the autofill. When I grab this handle and if I drag it down in continuing direction, it sees that there was a pattern that was starting to be created, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to continue to follow that pattern for me and fill in those cells. It can do the same thing here with the months of the year. I can just go through until I get to December. It does it with the days of the week. We can set a pattern. We can be counting by 2, and it will do this for us. So it's kind of powerful. It's a way to just repeat some numbers in a series. Alright, so let's go back and we're going to do this one more time. We'll do it the long way, then we're going to use the autofill handle here. So the sum, I'm going to come up, choose my cell. I go to my auto sum, and it is the sum, and it tries to guess, yep, D13 through D30. When I come here, the auto sum, I want to have the average. In this case, it's the average of all of these scores, and you can see that their average is exactly the same. My kids hate this assignment because they think they're doing it wrong. Here we have the high score. I'm going to grab the maximum, and here's where the difference comes out. When I grab the maximum of these, you can see that his maximum was only 154. Let's grab our low score. That'll be our min. The minimum score for Tim is 125. And our range is going to be the highest minus the lowest. So this is equal to the highest score minus our lowest score. Now I can start by grabbing my autofill handle. I'm going to drag right across here. What I've done is I've drug over all of the formulas so you can see that I have. This is using column E, this is using column F, I'm using column G, and I can see some differences here now in our bowlers. We can see that even though they have the same average, some of their high scores are higher, some of their low scores are lower. Mike does pretty good. He has probably the highest high score, but apparently he showed up one day with a broken arm. So it gives you a chance to look better at the data. If I highlight all of my data, I can actually sort it. Now I could sort it by each column by just grabbing this one here and going to the Data tab. And I can sort it from Z to A, Z being the highest. Continue with my current selection. Yep. So I'm just going to be sorting these, and you can see Jared's scores down through here. Let's grab the rest of these. We're going to sort again from highest to lowest, and you can see the consistency of Tim and Mike. Didn't sort like he was supposed to. Continue with the current selection, yes. Okay, so you can see Mike's scores there. You have to watch it. Sometimes the computer doesn't do exactly what you tell it to, and for some reason Mike's cell is not So you can see that we have just the scores here from the high to the low. Okay, the last thing we're going to look at before we start the assignment, I brought these scores over, and let's say we're going to create a new chart. I have bowling scores, and I've written it in cell 1A. You can see it starts to bleed over into B1 and a little bit into C1. If I want to center this, if I just go to my center button, that doesn't do me anything. It just centers it in that column. What I want to do is called merge, and I can grab the entire range. If I want to center the bowling scores from A to H, I mark the range where I want them to be, and I come to merge and center. And now when I click on this, it's going to make this into one giant cell. The same thing goes the other way. If I needed to unmerge a cell, I could come to merge and center, and I could unmerge those cells. If I had to delete Sarah's scores because she's no longer available, I can then come back, grab this, and merge and center across here, and you can see I have a smaller sampling, but I still have the ability to center that cell by merging it.